Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for joining us today. My name is Corey Webb, and I'm a marketing director here at Turn Zero, and I'd like to welcome you to our webinar titled Mastering Outcomes-Based Customer Success Strategies for Sustainable Growth. Before we get started, I do want to remind you that we are recording today's session, and we'll be sending out a link to the recording tomorrow, so you can keep an eye out for that in your email. Throughout the presentation, you're welcome to submit your questions via the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. We have also opened up the chat for everyone today, so please feel free to engage and use that to engage with one another, and just change when you do when you're typing in the chat, make sure it's going to everyone and not just our panelists, so everyone can see what you're sharing. We will address as many questions as we can during the Q&A portion of this webinar, which will be at the end of the presentation. So again, submit your questions, but as a reminder, put that in the Q&A, not the chat. It will be easier for us to find them in the Q&A. Now I'm pleased to introduce to you our speakers today. We have Keishla Caesar-Jones and Stephanie Workman-Bolden joining us today. Keishla is the Senior Director of Partner Success at EAB, where she leads a team focused on delivering value to partners in the EdTech marketing space, guiding them towards organizational and business goals. And we're also joined by Stephanie, who is VP of Partner Success at Discovery Education, where she leads a partner success org that is responsible for nurturing the customer journey and developing a growth strategy. So with that, I will turn it over to the two of you to get things started.
Thanks so much, Corey. We appreciate that. Thank you, everybody, for joining. As Corey mentioned, the chat is open, so we encourage you to interact with one another. And we're going to get started by asking you right away to interact with one another. And so we want to make sure that we're getting started checking in to see how hungry you are by asking you, what's your favorite thing to order from the Cheesecake Factory? And what's something you would never order from the Cheesecake Factory? All right away, Isha, all the things. I love Cheesecake Factory.
Caesar, cheesecake. I hear you, Ken. Too many options. Red velvet.
Egg rolls.
Egg rolls.
Love it. So many things.
These are desserts. Limoncello cake. Ooh, I have some new things to try.
Ooh, a sandwich. Thanks, Landon. We love it. All right. So I'm sure you got to be wondering, what does a Cheesecake Factory have to do with customer success? You know, when we think about organizations, figuring out what they do well and what your customers need. So Cheesecake Factory knows we're hungry, and they've really decided that they want to do everything well, or maybe they're not. You know, so there's so many options, as you all said, you know, happening at the Cheesecake Factory. So when we think about trying to figure out what's our favorite thing and what's a no-no, you know, there's so many things to be able to build from. So Steph, you know, I know you're a lover of the Cheesecake Factory. So what's your MO when you get in there?
Keishla, listen, you talk to me weekly. You know my love for Cheesecake Factory, and for everyone on here. Cheesecake Factory to me in college was my Michelin-starred restaurant. Like, that got me through hard times. But I think that I'm more excited about the concept of cheesecake's optionality than I am in application, because it's an overwhelming experience for me. When I go, I sit down, the same thing happens every time. I scroll through 18 pages of their 20-page menu, and I look through things. And I know I generally know what I want. I have cravings. I'm hungry, to your point, Keishla, but it's just hard for me to get there. And there's so many options. And one of two things tends to happen in my experience. When I'm talking with the wait staff, they usually give me a series of directional questions to help me get to where I want to. Or they lean in and say, you know what, I know you just chose this, but to be honest, these signature dishes over here, this is what we do really well here. Like, this is our value, right? Like, these are handmade, they're great, they're a specialty. This is what I recommend over here. Steak, that might not be our thing, but these things over here are. And when we think about this experience and how I go there, and that is, I'm the most annoying patron ever, but when we go through this, I reflect on our work in customer success and the things you and I talk about often. And it's a good segue into what we're talking about today, that a guided directional approach is always going to lead to the most optimal outcome for customers, but you have to know your value to do that.
Exactly.
So wanted to take you on that, my experience for today.
So well put. We want to thank Corey for formally introducing us. So you're like, what are these ladies doing? So we've got a clear introduction of who we are as professionals, but we're also really deep into figuring out how, customer success connects to some of our everyday life situations. And when we started to sit down and talk about outcomes-based customer success, we somehow stumbled onto the Cheesecake Factory and what that experience is like. And it's very similar for so many of our partners who engage with our tools and our resources and our services, and they might feel overwhelmed by all the possibilities that could be. And it's really our job as CS leaders and CS teams to find that area of focus and get them on that right path, put them on the right track for success to be able to solve their problems. So in today's session, we want to spend some time and a bit of presentation and dialogue with you, talking about understanding what outcomes-based customer success is, why it matters. We want to delve a little bit into some strategies that you can do to think about bringing this into your organization. And then we're going to be a little transparent as well and show to you some things that we've done to bring an outcomes-based mindset into the work that we do with our customer success teams. So without further ado, let's get into it and talk about what it is and why does it matter. So always love to start, former teacher me, want to start with some strong definitions so we're all on the same page. Outcomes-based customer success is a strategy that's focused on ensuring customers achieve desired outcomes with your products. Oftentimes, we spend a lot of effort figuring out how to help them use it, and we're not necessarily keyed on what are the desired outcomes. And so this approach shifts the focus on merely delivering that product or service to actively engaging your customers and helping them understand how your tools, resources, or services lead to outcomes that support mutual success, both for you as an organization and for the customer that you're putting at the center. So there's a couple of core features that are going to be familiar to you that are hallmarks of outcomes-based customer success. And we want to start off by doing a poll and getting a sense from you of what areas of these are challenges for you and where have you integrated these aspects of outcomes-based customer success in your work. So we're going to take just a quick second and let you take a look at the poll here. We're seeing the answers come in. While we're waiting, I'm so sorry, Robbie, you've never been to a Cheesecake Factory.
Oh, we'll make that happen. But we gave you a little insight into the experience. So,
all right, give it just a few more seconds. About half of you have voted. All right, about 5 seconds. We'll close the poll, ticking up.
I'm going to go ahead and close the poll and share out the results with everyone.
So the first question we see here is, which of these features have you integrated? Steph, I'm looking at here, about a third of them really are leaning into that customer-centric focus. And I know that can be a bit of a buzz phrase. Of course, we put our customers at the center. But what that means and how it is actualized in your organization might be customer-centric in ways that might not also be focused on outcomes. We see a lot of you, about a couple of smatterings of percents of you are into continuous and purposeful engagement, built value realization, proactive support. So it looks like there's opportunities here. Which of these features are most challenging for you? Interestingly enough, that value realization and continuous and purposeful engagement is popping up high on the list. And so I kind of want to lean in a bit with Steph here and ask her to share a bit about how some aspects of these core features of outcomes-based engagement have shown up in the work she's doing with her teams.
I'm excited because I think I have some colleagues here and so proud of the work we've been doing. But when I look at this, I think about some of the work we're doing around data storytelling and creating narrative-based talk tracks for data-driven insights. But I look at collaboration and partnership, and that makes me think of a couple things of the work we're doing right now. When I think of partnership, you can think about, yes, cultivating relationships with your customers, absolutely. But for us, there's a lot of work we're doing internally before we get to the partners, before we get to the customers. And one thing that sticks out is just, having a collective language established of the value of our products. And that comes from having what we call partner success, customer success sitting side by side with sales. Because while the actual way that you speak in an acquisition meeting to a potential customer versus retention can look different, the value of your product or service is not, right? So we've done a lot of that work, and it's allowed the sales team to look at us and say, oh, wow, I didn't realize how challenging it can be to develop goals to drive outcomes with customers. And we look at them and say, yeah, and this is how you are a part of this customer journey too, pre-sale. So it's made us more efficient.
Yeah, I think what you're highlighting in that internal collaboration and partnership is also helping to tap in what it means to be customer centric, and that is about all parts of the organization. We often have that struggle as customer success to say we feel like the weight of the customer is on our shoulders, but really it's all about sales, product, marketing, and all of these things coming together in synergy to make sure that that customer centric focus holds up. And when you have really good alignment between your teams, it makes a big difference. So thanks for indulging us in hearing a little bit about like where you see that you're standing out around outcomes-based customer success and those core features, and where you might have some challenges. Hopefully in the time that we have remaining today, you'll pick up some tips and ideas and guidance to be able to continue on your journey. So one of the things we wanted to do next was talk about how is outcomes-based customer success different than what we would consider a traditional CS approach, or what was sort of the old school origins of customer success and account management when it got started. So
Yep.
Steph, I'm going to kick it back to you to talk a little bit about this.
And some of you, this may resonate with you because some of you, your roots are in account management, or you're in account management today, maybe customer support, customer experience, right? There's a lot of good discussions happening on LinkedIn on differentiating all these roles. But I would say from a traditional perspective, when I was back in my account management days, everything was really rooted in satisfaction. It was like, are they happy? Are you doing things to make them happy? We looked at customer satisfaction scores. We looked at response times, resolution, but it felt very reactive. I think the reality is we all probably feel reactive in our roles every day anyway. I don't know if that ever goes away, but we felt very reactive. So take a look at this for a second and process this traditional view, right? And now let's go to the next. This is how we compare this to outcomes-based work, where you see that pivot from satisfaction-based reaction to achieving specific measurable outcomes that are important to the customer's business. Cultivating relationships are incredibly important. Being liked by your customers is important. But I think we all agree in this economy, in this market, it's not enough for people to retain customers, to grow them. And we always tell our team members, like, you can be liked all day by your customers. They can love you. They can tell you about their families. They can tell you about their kids, and they will drop you in a heartbeat. If you cannot also show that you are measuring towards their intended outcomes, like the relationship's important and it's critical, but also achieving customer goals. And this is where you see that pivot and that shift, and you look at the metrics, and yes, customer satisfaction, net promoter score, but there's a whole formula of things that would be included in some sort of outcomes-based approach with customers.
Yeah. And why is this so critical? A recent LinkedIn polls show that 93% of customer service and success teams say that expectations from their customers are higher than ever. Because guess what? Our customers are more savvy. They have access to more information that leads to increased expectations. They want to have a better understanding of the data and how things drive and connect with one another. Business success depends on how relevant your organization can be, to your product at any given moment to your customers. And what we're seeing across organizations is 30% of SaaS companies have reported increased churn this year. I know it's something that we're challenged with in this really tight and competitive market, especially for competing for dollars. And then lastly, outcomes help define the customer journey by helping identify key milestones to help reach those targets. And increasingly, 78% of CSMs are finding themselves responsible not only for the service delivery of the product, but they're responsible for the revenue retention. And it's very hard to maintain that revenue or even put yourself in a space of expanding if you're not able to speak to outcomes. So this is why shifting from that traditional mode to outcomes-based customer success matters so much. So hopefully we're preaching to the choir. We know that we're all working on this journey. None of us are sitting back and saying, wow, I just can't wait to just continue to stay in reactive mode and hope it works out for the best. But we felt it important to make sure we lay down some of those foundations and that we're having a shared conversation and understanding of things. So now what we want to do is talk a little bit about some strategies and then get into showing you all some things that we've done, and then additionally open it up for some questions. So hopefully you guys have your questions coming in. We're excited to take those. So when you want to get started, I think we've identified 3 core areas to think about when you're getting started with outcomes-based customer success. And number 1, it starts with making sure that you're really aligned with your product and sales. Some of the work that we've done, and we'll showcase some of this, is just really making sure that we've got a good understanding and shared conversation about value proposition, so that you avoid those situations where the customer comes on board and what they thought they bought and what you do are 2 different things. So making sure you have really strong alignment between what the product can do, where it serves your markets, and sales is really critical. The second is discovery with direction. Gone are the days of saying to somebody, what are your goals? And it's being super wide open. Like they have a lot of goals. What are your goals about? What are your goals related to? So discovery with a direction, and we're going to break that down a little bit. And then finally, creating value frameworks that bring together all aspects of your organization, that put that customer at the center, and you know where you are in the journey and delivering value and making sure that your partners are seeing that as you work along the way. So let's start with breaking this down and talk a bit about discovery with direction.
I love this. Actually, Keishla, you and I have been talking about this for, I feel like, months, of how to ask these things better to customers. Like you said, like, we can ill afford to have open-ended goal conversations with such short period of time to make impact, to retain, and to grow, right? So how to lead with more direction. And a lot of that is with guided questioning. So it does start with understanding your value, but it also requires understanding the pain points and challenges of your customers, so that you can uncover a little bit more with guided questions, and how your product or service can fit into that. When you think about active listening, this is another moment where everybody's like, well, of course I got to listen. But we don't all do that well, right? That is a skill that we all need to practice and continue to practice. But Keishla, you said something earlier around sometimes you inherit customers where they're just not the ideal customer profile anymore, right? And that can come for a number of things. Maybe they were missold at the pre-sale stage. Maybe they just have complete unrealistic expectations of what your product or service can do. I think everybody on here probably has at least one of those customers in their portfolio today. And those are the most challenging to sit and have an effective goal-setting conversation, because you're like, I don't know, what you want is not necessarily what we can provide. But that's why that active listening is so important, when you really pay attention to those explicit and implicit needs, because you are going to have to be the one to pivot and find value somewhere to measure, so that you can redirect them to another set of values that may not be necessarily what they're looking for at first. But now you got to realign them. So that active listening is a critical component to this. And you can all see how this is a progression, right? You kick off with those discovery guided questions. You're actively listening. You are now directing them towards solutions. Again, solutions where you know your product or service provides the most value based upon what their answers are. And then you get to build this narrative. And this whole progression makes me think about, there's a number of different like talk track programs out there that really help you break down these thought processes into a really great framework to help team members process the way that they navigate this conversation. But Keishla, I know you've done a lot of work around this with your team members. Walk us through this whole concept of like discovery with direction that you're in your customer journey.
First thing I'll even say, just even listening to you talk through that stuff, is that direct towards solutions has me thinking about, when you ask the Cheesecake Factory waiter, you have these 20 pages of options, what do I do? And similarly, some of the work I recently had done over the past year or so with my team, we would get into these kickoff meetings of new implementations, and we were asking these leaders who were managing faceted strategic enrollment strategy. We would ask them big, broad, open questions. And that that is always a good start to have an understanding, but everything that keeps a customer up at night might not be where my business aligns. And
Yeah.
so we spent some time really focusing our questions on, really understanding the part of the universe that our product has alignment with. And then once again, providing that direction and that connection back to where our value statements prove out. And when I show you all one of my examples from some of the work that we've done, we started to back build those value statements even into our sales team's transition form to us, so that when our sales team was communicating to us what what the pre-sales customer was hearing as value, they were rolling that into us in the same shared language. And then when we talked to the customer again after launch, when we were launching the partnership, we were making that connection between that first discovery and the way that we wanted to move them towards value with our product. And so it's really important that you're finding that connective tissue. And it's great to have these big, broad conversations, because I think those are nice when you're trying to find opportunities for expansion and growth and other opportunities. But when you are trying to prove out value for the product that you're launching, it is really important that you stay super focused, and it helps you keep your implementation and your adoption process on track.
That's so important. There's so many moments where you say, what's keeping you up at night? And then they unload a series of things. You're like, oh, we can't do very much about that. And then the conversation is dominated by this element of pain points that you might not necessarily can solve, nor should you in some cases. So thank you for sharing that.
Exactly. So another aspect of really starting to understand your objectives-based outcomes and objectives-based journey is to really think about your value frameworks. Oftentimes we are strong experts on how our product works. We know what every button does. We know what every report does. We know what every dashboard displays, but we know it from the inside the house perspective. And we need to be thinking about, why would a customer choose our product or service? And that requires us to think about what this product or service looks like with us in the hands of somebody that doesn't have the same knowledge as you. And so we have to think about how, from a value frameworks perspective, how this product is going to serve their needs, how it's going to address their business pain points, and then identify segments where we have an opportunity to create more value than our competition. We're often dealing in very competitive spaces, and there's somebody that has something like what we do. And it's all well and good. We need to understand our Me Too's, but we also need to understand where are those places where we create unique and standout value for our customers that's different. And that takes some time as teams to start to build out some value frameworks. So I wanted to share with you all some questions that you could ask yourself as you start to think about building an outcomes-based strategy. So if you're thinking about that customer-centric approach, proactive engagement, or value-driven success, and then ultimately scalability and efficiency, these are some things that you can approach to start to think about. So how well do we understand our customers' specific business goals and challenges? How are we working with customers to co-create value to drive mutual success? How do we ensure that our proactive efforts are seen as valuable rather than intrusive? Lots of conversations on LinkedIn about the infamous check-in. I'm just checking in, right? But how you get to proactive engagement is to know that at this point in the journey, this is the engagement that's necessary to move your partners forward towards value. And that requires advanced thinking about understanding where they are in their business cycle and where they are in the product journey. What metrics are going to help you speak to that? Some of the metrics you will own, some of the metrics they will own. And that's that co-collaborative space that you want to live in, to make sure that they are able to take what you can give them and then say, how do you rub that up against data and information that they have? And then ultimately, we all want to be super personalized. We all want to say we customize, but ultimately, really good CS is not about customization. It's about tailoring and scaling efficiently. You want to be able to do the right things repeatedly that have good outcomes and success. And so that's how you're going to drive your work forward. So these are just some good first questions to think about as you're starting to break apart your shift from a traditional CS journey to an outcomes-based journey.
That's a great point, Keith, especially
Yeah.
that scalability piece. When you think back to the poll we took earlier, that was a big challenge for some folks on here of being able to do this work, being able to have an outcomes-based approach, but with that scalability and efficiency, and how you can do that. But you're right, it's about, strategic tactics around personalization, but customizing, tailoring. Yeah.
Exactly. So one of the activities that you can do is write a customer success objective. And the CSO has two parts. What does your product do or service do to address a need? And how will the customer judge success? So we want to show you what that could look like with something common that I think we all know. Enterprise LinkedIn learning. Some of you might take some LinkedIn learning courses. And so we would say, what does the product do? LinkedIn Learning is an online educational platform that helps you discover and develop business, technology related, and creative skills through expert-led courses. We all agree that's what LinkedIn learning is. But if I was a customer who bought enterprise LinkedIn Learning for my organization, my teams, how would I judge success? LinkedIn Learning customers might judge success by the use of their product usage. And then they should start to see well-trained employees, right? Employees that are able to address the different business challenges based on that training. So they should start to see some improvement, or like you said, Justin, some ramp up time. So we wanted to give you guys just a minute or two to think about your product or service, and write a customer success objective. So remember, we want to key in on things that are less, more, faster, easier, maximize, minimize, those types of terms. So we want to give you an opportunity to take a second and write a customer success objective for your organization, for your product. So if you feel brave, we would love for you to share it in the chat. But take a second. What does your product do to address a need? Can you state that in a sentence? And how do your customers judge success when they use that product for that need? So we'll have a little bit of awkward silence.
Inform directionally via data. Success is usually judged by ROI. Thank you, Brian.
All right. Faster speed to market. And that's the need that your product addresses, Nikki. And so thinking about happier, more engaged employees is how they would judge that success. So I think this is a great exercise to take back to your teams, take back to your organization. Stephanie, it says it removes the guesswork from your product, removes the guesswork from compliance audit prep. Success is judged by achievement of a clean audit report. Love it. Those types of simplified statements really helps you to focus on your direction. Sometimes we can get caught up on how to use the product, but how do we get our customers really connected to what does that success look like? It can really help to increase your time to value moments with your partners, which I think is really important. So we want to use the last few minutes that we have to just showcase a little bit of some things that we've done in our business. So I'm going to turn it over to Steph first, and she's going to talk a little bit about her work at Discovery Education.
The interesting thing about some of these, Keishla and I, we talk often about, we join a lot of sessions just to learn and continue our own growth path. And sometimes we jump right into the action and what we do externally with our customers to support, but there's so much groundwork to discuss of the training and what that looks like internally in your companies in order to prepare for these conversations. So we're going to break this up a little bit. I'm going to talk a little bit about what we've done internally to work on outcomes-based approaches. And Keishla's going to go into, okay, now that we've done that, how does this translate to our customers? So Discovery Education is a K through 12 learning platform that provides digital and learning tools and digital content for school districts across the world. So you can see here on the left some of our customer goals and objectives: alleviating teacher prep time, providing digital ready to use content. But what we do well, why? What's the value on the right-hand side here? We save teachers time, differentiated multimodal content to meet the needs of all students. So that just gives you a little bit of like starting with the why, who we are, what do we do well, understanding our value. When you get to the next slide, when we thought about this, I'm so proud of this team. I said that earlier, but I'm so incredibly proud around the work that the partner success team has done at Discovery Education. Some of these folks that are on here now, but I'm so proud of the way how engaged they were with this idea of really leaning in this year into skills-based training. That was really important to us. We didn't just want to train on the tools, right? We wanted to really focus on the skill and the art that is goal setting. So we created this 3-part series around it. And we anchored all of it in SMART goals. There's a lot of goal setting frameworks out there, but SMART goals is the OG of all the goal setting, right? I always feel like SMART goals were ahead of its time, because when you think earlier to what Keishla said around the economy and the market right now, SMART goals is setting you up for success around establishing specific, measurable, achievable goals that are time bound. We don't have time on our side in customer success. We have to drive impact as quickly as we can and timestamp it. So we anchored it in SMART goals. And we also use this, I live by this, but setting goals is the first step in turning the invisible to the visible. It's so important. What we do, we drive impact every day, but sometimes those things aren't always translated into qualitative, quantitative data that you can show. And you're just like, we're doing so much and we're achieving so much. And especially Keishla and I, you and I, we work in ed tech, we work in education. Our tools are impacting students and teachers, but having those SMART goals are so essential for making it visible and showing what that impact looks like. So as I sit and I look at this, calling out my colleague, Brady Phillips, who he loves to break things down into frameworks. Listen, if there's one word that Keishla and I use incessantly outside of Beyonce, it is the word framework, because we love us frameworks. We love frameworks. And that's probably the educator in us, because frameworks aren't just great about providing structure and alignment for your teams, but they support the full process of metacognition. When you are breaking down your thought process into digestible chunks, that's what people connect to. So when you're putting together trainings for your customer success managers, like using frameworks to do that is where people draw the connection. But we thought, if you don't have, Churn Zero is wonderful. There's other programs out there, but if you don't have those, you don't need them to be able to build and start somewhere with a framework, right? So we started and we use this as part of our training of having our team members look at it and say, once you've gone through that discovery work, right? And you've looked at those questions, you've gotten towards some sort of goal, and you looked and used the SMART framework to see, is it achievable? Is it relevant? You've identified it, and now you go through this continuum of, okay, well, how are we going to measure that? And do we agree on that? And once we've agreed on that, let's be clear about where you are right now, customer. Let's uncover the current state. You want to achieve this, but you are here. Now, where do we want to go, right? And let's think about, where do you want to go? You're here, but you want to go here. And here's how we're going to get there. That's the fun part of customer success. It's the action that we can drive. Now that we can identify a set of activities that's going to support the goal. Think back earlier, we talked about traditional versus outcomes-based. Traditional, we're just doing a bunch of stuff. Outcomes-based, we have identified a set of activities that are going to support an identified goal. So if you go to the next slide, when you think about this very simplified framework, right? Discovery education, this isn't real data. This is just us talking through this. But when we trained our team members, we said, use this simple framework. Like, let's pretend we sit down with a school district. Our end users of our resources are teachers and students. So if we sit down with some school district leadership and they say, our goal, we want to deliver standards aligned, district approved digital content to our teachers. We'll think, go back to the SMART. Is that achievable? Is it specific? Is it, relevant? Sure, but how are we going to measure that? Well, we can look at teacher usage to measure that. Now let's talk about where you are right now. We are about 45% of teachers using that. Where do you want to be? That's achievable, right? We got to safeguard our achievability of our goals. 65, 66%, we can do that. And how are we going to get there? Now we've layered in those tactics. We've got engagement playbooks that we've developed. We've got some new teacher academy that we can do to specifically drive the work towards that goal. So this is just an example of the internal work we did with our team members to break down this framework and this process so that they can see that it is a process. And like Keishla, you said before, it's not about going in and going, what are your goals? Yeah. It's about driving direction so that you can put them through this journey here.
I think what I liked about this process that you laid out, Steph, is, oftentimes we frame what success looks like in our terms as an organization. So ultimately, yeah, we want more people using our product for longer, faster, better, smarter, those types of things. And what really is the push in objectives-based and outcomes-based CS is to flip it from our language to the customer's language. And I just this morning was doing an exercise with my team on that. We're getting ready to build some QA call processes. And we have a way that we talk about the product performance to the partner, But when we wanted to have this conversation with them about the value, we needed to flip it from what the product does to what the product does for the customer. And so starting with these statements that are in customer language is the first part of being customer centric, because oftentimes we begin with us and what we see by way of the product or service performance. So that's what I loved about this. And then just really taking that simplified breakdown of how to think about where you are and where you want to be, and ultimately what's the data that's going to help you measure it, because it's about how do you figure out what are the actions that you need to take that are going to keep moving you along that journey. So I loved that your team broke that down, and you started with your, not with the customer first, but with your team members first, of how to change the process of having conversations. So I'm going to share my example just to tell you the organization that I'm with, because oftentimes you hear strategies and things that people are doing, and it doesn't. I was talking to a great person who was doing some great things with customer success, but it was like my product and my business doesn't align to that. So I want you to understand the business that I'm coming from. So I work in the undergraduate marketing and admissions space. I service two different products. One is virtual tours, one is virtual communities. Today, I'm spotlighting the virtual communities product. Our customers are focused on building institutional affinity for prospective students and their families. They're trying to influence their likelihood to select an institution as their college home. They're trying to support student engagement with peers, as well as managing scaled communication with a high level of personalization. Our product is a private virtual community space that allows for community building, affinity building, helping students connect with both peers, and supporting also mass communication across large groups of students that might have varying needs on their college search journey. So that's the product that I support. As I'd mentioned at the top of the call, one of the things that we've done, we would go into these conversations with partners with lots of different goals, and the conversation could go in a lot of different ways, and it did not allow us to stay super focused on the decisions that needed to be made on the build of the product. And so what would happen sometimes is when they would get to the end, they were like, man, if I had known this, I would have done that. Yeah. So you spent some time, first of all, going back to our product, and then taking the opportunity to say, like, what are the two core problems that our product solves for our partners based on their goals and the work that they do? And we identified goal statements that our product responds to. Now, if a partner is using our product, all of these are going to happen, but not all of these are of equal importance to every partner as they're doing their work. And so what we would say to partners, and this was something that we got transitioned to us from the sales team, is which one of these or two of these goals in these different categories are most important to you? And then we were able to take these goal statements and build playbooks and guidance, and it helped to influence the decisions they made for how they built their communities. And it just gave us a faster time to implementation, and it created less sort of like, I wish I had done, or I wish I'd known, because we were really focused on what was most important to them. So you can do things like this in your organization by just, first of all, identifying what are your product value propositions and how does that play out in customer-facing goal language that they can select from. And then it allows you to build those scalable, repeatable, effective, and efficient playbooks to be able to work from. So that's an example of how this work has shown up in our space. So I know we're getting right in our Q&A time, Corey. So we want to thank you all for indulging us in this conversation. We hope that you picked up some gems and some nuggets along the way. Corey, do we have any questions that have come in through the Q&A?
We do. But I want to encourage others to please submit your questions via the Q&A button at the bottom. And as we said, we have a decent amount of time to get to some. So let's get started. Our first question says, how can outcomes-based CS strategies be leveraged in a digital scaled model where CSM is using a one-to-many approach?
Love that question. I think that, and Steph, I know you all have a lot of great digital tools that are built just from my knowledge of my time at Discovery. So I'm happy if you want to jump in, but I have some thoughts as well.
Oh, no, go ahead.
Yeah. So I think one of the things, it still is the same process, right? Of figuring out what your core value props are and then building out pathways. So I think in a digital scaled space, this is going to be about leveraging help center spaces, help leveraging digital marketing pathways that might put partners on a particular journey, training and education resources if it's needed. So I know it might vary based on what your product is, but I think you can still deploy the same mindset, but it just then gets delivered in a different way. Instead of being done in person, you are just leveraging your different automation tools for partners. Maybe they take a survey and it says, hey, like this is most important to me, and then triggers and activates some sort of automated pathway and journey that they're on.
I love that. And Keishla, you're reminding me of a presentation one of our sales operations leaders, Amber Caldwell, did months back, where she talked about just start somewhere and start small. Some of you have a huge, vast product suite, right? And it's overwhelming to think, well, how do I create pre-populated goals? Maybe you know them, maybe you don't yet, but just start with one or two. And that's something that we're big advocates of at Discovery, is like, starting here with just a couple core products first before we branch out of like, what are the trends right now? What are we seeing? And what do we, over time that information we've collected, are those like top 3 to 4 goals or reasons why people use our resource, and develop some playbooks from that. And now we can scale out to say, now we can, especially in our digital world of more automation, now we can lead in with that, give out surveys to see, do these goals resonate with you? And an entire population of customers that are really all an automated journey. And that's been helpful. Is it everyone and everything? No, but it's allowed us to take one segment and scale that first while we try and scale other pieces. So I think the scalability piece can be really overwhelming to think about. And I think it's all about taking like bite-sized chunks and starting with that.
Yeah.
I like both of those answers. Yeah, starting with a small group and then scaling it beyond that, and certainly relying on automation. Our next question is, how do you get buy-in and commitment from the sales team to consistently provide this pre-sales information in an organized manner?
Ooh, who's been in our head? Who's been in our head? That's a good one.
So first of all, hopefully you guys are cultivating relationships with your sales team, and finding really good regular ways for interactivity. Oftentimes you can find yourself the magic question. Interacting with if you're only interacting with your sales team when there's a problem, then obviously it'll feel like that's all you do is deal with problems. What we were able to do, we have a standard, what we call a new partner information form. We call it the NPI. And without an NPI, you don't get a CSM assigned. And so it's just a part of our process and operations. We spent some time agreeing what was in it, and we shifted from a very open-ended NPI. And I promise you, if you are giving your sales teams essay test for transitioning information, you're likely not going to get a lot of things filled out. We took those very things from the slide I showed you before and put them on the NPI form and just had them be able to check a box. When you were talking to the partner, what was most important to them? And they were able to check some boxes. So I think number one, creating the least amount of barriers to the sales team giving you that information. And I said NPI, we call it a new partner information form. That's just our internal thing. But that's what I would do. I don't know, Steph, if you've got some other advice.
It's a good point. And honestly, I think you're right. There is a huge, enormous amount of relationship building internally, and it requires leaders to come together and to have an understanding that your teams are going to thrive on that type of collaboration. And, you created that form. I know that there's certain things that you can build into Salesforce, for example. We've taken advantage of that because I think they have the best of intentions to collect some of this information, but they're moving like this. Aggressive metrics, they're being measured aggressively. They're just, it's a lot, right? So like you said, it's removing those barriers, and we created some similar kind of information input area in Salesforce that they can plug in and use. I think my role is going to be taking that and showing the journey of once that information is plugged in pre-sale, right? And then we kicked off and we see this partnership to really bubble up why it was so important to collect that pre-sale, and look what it translated to into this incredible partnership. And I think we need to celebrate that more, but you need to be loud about it, because that's the incentive for them to do that and to collect that pre-sale. And also be loud about those partnerships and those relationships with customers where they're not entirely ideal because we didn't have the right goal conversations in the beginning. where sometimes their expectations of what your product can do or can't do wasn't really well established. And now we're here. So I think there's a huge element of celebration, but really capturing those success stories so that we can see there is a growth and retention incentive for you to collect this at the pre-sale and how important it is.
I love that. Kind of in the same vein, our next question is talking about marketing. So it says, I feel like marketing is also a big part of establishing the value proposition that both sales and CS are using in customer conversations. Marketing is often creating the material being pushed to prospects and used by sales. What's your point of view on bringing marketing into the conversation?
Yes.
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 Yes. There you go.
So
yes.
yeah, depending on your organization, you might have one marketing, you have your main marketing team. You could have dedicated CS marketing, which I had the distinct pleasure to have when I came into my new organization. But there should be alignment across the three. We've really this year are improving how we do that. We just hosted a partner prospect webinar. Like those things should be feeding one another, and you should be pushing on the same levers. It just, to Stephanie's point at the top of the call, how you might take a tool or a resource and put it in front of a prospect. You can take that same tool or resource. You just might need to just reorganize it a little bit for a customer. And so I think that marketing and sales and success are a three-headed hydra. Like you got to be working together.
Yeah.
Product. Yeah.
It's so important. And, I know Keishla and I, again, we're in the education market. So your language matters, semantics matters. The way that you speak about value and what your resources do needs to connect towards the end user, your teachers, your students. And so you have to be thoughtful about the language you're putting in, the way you're phrasing something. Everything matters. And I'm sure all of you work in industries where your language is a major component. And so having those connections with marketing is so important, so that some of them come from a marketing background. They may not come from your industry background. And so drawing that connection together is so important, because marketing folks will tell you, like, a lot of them would love to get in front of customers more, to hear customer voice. They just don't always get that opportunity. So they need you to give the voice of customer to them so they can integrate together. We have really talented customer success managers at Discovery, and we've actually pulled a couple of them who just have like they got a little marketing bug to them. And we've made them into a little marketing work group. And so our marketing team meets with them monthly, and it's a great growth opportunity for them. They come back and they kind of represent customer success for us as well. They speak on our behalf. They give real-time feedback of what's happening in the field so they can connect to it. And then we come together and we think, when you're making something as simple as a flyer, that there's fidelity behind it. We all agree, we all had input. So that's been helpful.
Love it. As someone in marketing, I think that's great advice. Our next question is, how detailed do you want your customer success outcomes to be? They said, I have so many outcomes possible with our tool. What's your advice there?
I think, so not knowing your tool, I would say, yes, there might be so many outcomes with your tool, but there are definitely probably top ones that your partners are most coming to your tool for value. So you have to be able to prioritize. There are some things that happen because of your product, and it's like, that wasn't what we did by design. It wasn't, what we went in the problem to solve. And so those things happen. You want to, like, those are great, but you need to know at most, like, what are the 3 to 5 core value areas that your product supports, and be able to speak to that. The Cheesecake Factory is doing it in 20 pages, but we probably all shouldn't be doing that.
No, there's something on there that nobody orders. It's like, do I want the spicy nuggets from McDonald's? No, I know they offer it. I don't want it. It's not their best thing. It's the Big Mac is, and that's what I want. So I think you're right. It is knowing your product. Well, I think it's going to take a little bit of time to start collecting that information and finding ways to measure that internally, of like, what are these common ways and intended outcomes that are most popular, so you can build more playbooks towards it. But I think in your case, I think oftentimes companies, we build things to do a million things, but that's not how it's always received or used. It could be used, it was built to do 30 things, but people really like 5 out of it. So I think it's putting that work in there.
And I think that the advice, Carrie, that Steph said earlier, start small. You don't have to do it all the first go round. So
Mm,
the first ones, you might expand it, but start small.
that makes sense. Our next question is, what are your suggestions for a partner who pushes you to adhere to their goals, even if they don't completely align with the product, with what the product can achieve?
Mm.
We all got one. We all have some.
I,
I
that's
no, you
not-
go ahead. No,
no.
we're both extra passionate. No, you go ahead.
I was gonna say, I think number one, it goes back to that active listening. I will say, we just recently had a partner who um just wasn't getting what they wanted out of the product. Some of their expectations of it, I believe, in my mind, there was a bit of, they evaluated 5 different products and sometimes they mush features together. They think this does that because I saw 5 different products do it. And they're like, where's that thing? Or where's that button? Or is that on the roadmap? Expectation management, yes, Michelle, is everything. And we got to a point where I know it's not something that everybody likes to hear, but we spent some time just redirecting their funds to something else that they were going to find value from. It also is important sometimes to know when, to Stephanie's point earlier too, when that customer doesn't no longer fits your ideal customer profile, that you're often better off finding a way to end the relationship respectfully than continuing to be in a space of friction. So
Yeah,
I think that happens sometimes.
I agree. Some of the best conversations we've had are the most challenging, where we were very transparent. And that might come to that point where it requires a transparent conversation of what we can do. And if we can't, here's why. Here's where we're choosing to invest and why. But Keishla, you made a great point, because I feel like some of these conversations, opportunities come out of it. There's we've done a lot of work around the concept of offboarding, where there's maybe some identified churn, but we're gonna keep you as a trusted relationship. And sometimes they'll say, this isn't what we want for this, but we actually have another department that does this. They may like you. I'll introduce you. And we've had a lot of opportunity that's come from that. Is that ideal? No, it's not. But I think transparency is ideal. And I think people respect it. I think they respect the confidence behind it, your ability to maintain that relationship. And again, there are ways to pivot, of providing value in some other way, somewhere, where you can still show that, even if it doesn't connect to that kind of unrealistic expectation they have.
Got it. Our next question is, how often should you be asking your customers what their goal outcomes are? Is that a yearly thing, a quarterly thing? What makes sense there?
That's a good question.
I think this, I know people hate this in customer success, but I think it depends. Because, like, we all have our own business cycles, right? And try as I might to get a customer to try to do something before the end of Q4, they don't care. It's not Q4 for them. So I think you have to really understand your customers' business cycle, who they're serving, to know when are the right times to check in. So like the one product that I showcased for you all, we would do a cycle kickoff, a mid-cycle check-in to calibrate, like, are we doing good things? Do we need to change course? Like, what's happening? And then an end of cycle close. But I have another product that doesn't follow that cycle so much. So I think it just really is going to depend on what is the flow of your customers and what's appropriate. Because I do think you can talk about goal. You shouldn't just ask them about their goals. You should ask them about their goals, set a plan to work towards those goals, and then be monitoring milestones toward achieving those goals. So doesn't mean that you might not reintroduce a new goal, but hopefully you're working on the goals that you established at the very beginning and you're checking in on those.
Those
Yeah.
customer journey meetings are so important, that you've scaffolded in, depending upon what your customer business looks like. And for us, it's school year, right? It's like back to school time, mid-cycle, summer, and looking out for those indicators that may impact it. So while we've established goals and we're working towards those milestones, which I agree, that's more important along the way, to just see how are we tracking towards those. Here's how we're doing. But when things come up like change of leadership, your decision maker left, like really be keen into those factors, those indicators, that maybe there's risk, maybe there's a new plan in place, maybe they're going to shift direction. And it's fair to front load those during those customer journey meetings, just to make sure you're not only on track to your goals, but what's changed? Where
Right.
are you pivoting? We know that this
The
is
goals we set with the other people, are these still your goals?
still here. Yeah.
That type of thing, yeah. I think this also comes into play of the oft spoken of and oft eulogized QBR. Is it dead? Is it alive? I don't know.
We
But
joke about that all the
we
time. They
joke
say
about it all the
QBRs
time.
are dead. We're like,
Are
when's the
they
Super
dead this
Bowl? We
week?
didn't know
What's
that.
going on? But I
Yeah.
think what it is that if you start to think proactively about what the customer journey is, and to the point of what are those questions to ask, how am I providing value-based interactions with my partners and my customers that's not intrusive? You should be thinking in advance. I also, this also falls into the, do I want to be proactive or do I want to be reactive? Well, of course we want a proactive plan, and we also want to have proactive reactive strategies in place. But if you are thinking about the right cadence for engaging with your customers, it quarterly is just time. It's why are you meeting? So figure out why you're meeting and how that why behind that meeting aligns with what your customers are doing. And then you align the right experience for that. So then how you should be checking on goals should align, or monitoring that progress or their adoption process should align to that. So I think it's really making sure that you understand in advance the journey. It's not unknown to us what the right, we should know what our customer's journey and experience should be that leads to successful outcomes. So
Awesome.
yeah.
We probably have time for just one more question. And this is a comment and a question that says, outcomes-based CS seems like a company-wide culture shift for it to be truly successful, not just customer success. Any thoughts on how to get buy-in from other teams to be on board with this model?
Oh, that's a good one. I feel like I think the work we've done with our sales team on value realization of our product and getting marketing, sales enablement. I realize that folks on this line, like not all of you have, some of you work at companies that are 30 people and maybe you're wear many hats. But with us having that ability to have so many collective meetings where a lot of these were exercises that leaders did together. Like you've had the marketing leaders with customer success with sales, going through some of these exercises together of what is the value of our product. And we don't just put customer success managers through product training and things. Like everybody's on the hook for that. Everybody has to be able to prove and succinctly talk about the value of where you are. And so that's how we connect the dots of why it matters, and everybody's got some way of showing where it's important for their input into it. And I think knowing, especially with how important cross-sell is in this market right now, being able to expand upon existing customer relationships that you have, that's why they're all in it right now, right? It's like it's tougher right now to get into green white space. Completely possible if you're doing the right things, right? The right strategies, but with a lot of hyper focus on expansion right now. Like I feel like very hyper focused on that. Everybody has to care. Everybody has to care about outcomes work. They have to care about goals. And I think it's been given customer success leaders a really big platform to lead some cross-functional discussions around it.
Yeah, I would agree. I think definitely it's the work, Adam, of everybody company-wide, but CS has to lead it. And I think we have to take the parts that are really in our hands, and we can't wait for everybody to do it. Somebody's got to lean in and start to lay the groundwork and the structure for it and pull people in. And so I think it's definitely clearly in our hands to manage this part of the customer journey and make sure that we're properly supporting it.
That's great advice.
Well, that was awesome. I know that, Corey, there's
Awesome.
tons of questions in there that we did not get to. I'm happy, Steph, and if you want to send them to us, we will do our best to try to reply to them.
Great idea.
So we thank you all for joining us today. A couple of takeaways you can see here, put your customer at the center, think about their needs, get direction from your product and sales teams and your value props, SMART goals to give you guidance, and make sure you have the metrics. We are happy to connect with you all on LinkedIn, so please find us. And we will also be at Zero In. We dipped a little bit into it. Is nice enough? Let's talk about it. So
Awesome.
Thank you all.
Yes, thank you both.
Thank you,
I dropped in a link to Zero In. We extended the early bird rate until September 16th, so there's still time to get in at a lower rate. And Thank you so much, Keisha and Stephanie, and I'm excited to see you guys in a month or so at Big Rig, or not Big Rig, sorry, Zero In.
Zero.
Yes.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of your day.
Bye.
You.